It is the year 1119, and beneath the hollowed stones of Jerusalem, within the very heart of the Temple of Solomon, a discovery is made that will echo through the centuries. Hidden from the world for millennia, a secret is unearthed. A secret so profound that its very existence threatens to unpend everything humanity thought it knew about the limits of knowledge and the laws of nature. Beneath the ruins of the ancient temple, a group of Templar knights, sworn to protect the sanctity of the church, uncovers something far more than gold or relics. They find a collection of ancient manuscripts, crisp, delicate pages filled not just with religious text, but with intricate diagrams and blueprints of machinery and mechanical designs that should have been impossible for any civilization of their time to create. Machines that could fly, machines that could reshape the very landscape of warfare. Hydraulic systems and anatomical drawings that suggested an understanding of the human body centuries before modern science would catch up. As they unroll the papyri and decode the cryptic symbols, the knights are faced with an overwhelming realization. What they have discovered is not merely a relic of the past, but a message from a civilization far more advanced than their own. A civilization whose knowledge, though hidden in plain sight, might have the power to alter the course of human history. Yet, as they stand in the dim, candlelit chambers beneath the temple, they face a decision that will echo through time. What should they do with this forbidden knowledge? Should they share it, risking their sacred vows and the power it might bestow? Or should they bury it, allowing it to slip into the dark shadows of history, preserved only by those few who dare to seek it out?
The Templars, bound by their oaths of secrecy and duty, decide that the world is not ready. The knowledge must remain hidden, its potential too dangerous for a world unprepared for its power. And so they carry the secret with them, leaving behind a trail of cryptic symbols and clues, encoded in their architecture, their art, and their rituals, waiting for the right minds at the right time to unlock the secrets that were buried beneath the temple's ancient stones. Thus begins a journey that will span centuries, a journey that will eventually lead to one of the greatest minds in history, Leonardo da Vinci. Unbeknownst to him, Leonardo is about to inherit this hidden legacy, and with it, the power to unlock the mysteries of the universe. But as the centuries pass, the knowledge passes from one generation to the next, each guardian adding to the puzzle until the time is right for a mind like Leonardo's to not only decipher it, but to use it in ways the Templars never could have imagined. Welcome back to the History Guy. In today's video, I will take you through the timeline of the story of Leonardo da Vinci. We'll start by uncovering the hidden knowledge discovered by the Templars beneath Solomon's temple, which will lead us to the genius of Leonardo himself. We'll explore how this secret knowledge was passed down through the ages, shaping the mind of one of history's greatest innovators. Along the way, we'll dive into his inventions, anatomical studies, and masterpieces, and see how Leonardo's work continues to influence the world today. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more historical deep dives, and if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly tell us why in the comments. We'd love to know and improve our content for you. In the heart of Jerusalem, beneath the Temple of Solomon, the Templars were no strangers to secrecy. For nearly a century, they had sworn oaths not only to protect the Christian faith, but also to guard its most sacred relics. Their mission was clear: uphold the church, maintain the sanctity of the divine, and ensure that no one, not the least of all the infidels, could desecrate the holy sites of Jerusalem. Yet in the shadowed crypts beneath the ancient stones of the temple, the knights stumbled upon something that threatened to dismantle everything they had ever known about the world, about their faith, and about the very limits of human understanding. The discovery was not a religious artifact or an ancient relic imbued with divine power. It was something far more challenging. They uncovered ancient manuscripts, papers unlike any they had ever seen, adorned with strange, unfamiliar symbols. But it was not the unfamiliar text that caught their attention. It was the drawings, intricate, delicate, and yet impossible. Diagrams of machines that defied reason, machines that could fly, machines that harnessed forces the Templars could scarcely imagine. How could such knowledge exist? The Templars were well versed in the religious texts of the Bible, in the teachings of the Church Fathers, in the works of Aristotle and Ptolemy, but this was something entirely different.
As the knights studied these manuscripts, their minds, trained to think in rigid religious terms, were forced to confront the possibility that they had stumbled upon knowledge that could rival their faith's core beliefs. These machines that could soar through the air, mechanisms that could lift and move massive weights, did not belong to any known civilization from their era. The Templars, men of faith and warriors of the Church, had spent their lives protecting what they believed was divine knowledge. Yet these diagrams spoke of a different kind of understanding, a science that seemed to transcend the religious dogma that had shaped their world. For the first time, they found themselves staring into the face of a question that had no easy answer. Could there be a higher knowledge than that which the Church had revealed? Could these diagrams, these blueprints, hold the key to a new understanding of God's creation, one that existed beyond the theological? These thoughts weren't just idle musings. They struck at the very core of the Templars' identity. If these diagrams were what they appeared to be, advanced engineering, detailed anatomical studies, and perhaps even knowledge of flight, then what did that say about their purpose? What did it mean to be a knight of the Templar Order if the very foundation of human understanding could be redefined by what they had just uncovered? The Templars had dedicated their lives to the protection of divine knowledge, but here they stood, faced with the potential for the world to unravel, not by the sword or the power of kings, but by the very force of human discovery and intellectual achievement. At first, the knights were unsure of how to proceed. Some viewed the manuscripts with a kind of reverence. After all, the Templars had long been seen as the keepers of secret knowledge, protectors of sacred mysteries. Perhaps this was a gift, a divine test, to see if they could wield such knowledge responsibly. However, there were others who saw it as a dangerous curse. The very existence of such knowledge, if made public, could shake the foundation of everything the Church had worked to build. It could challenge the very notion of divine authority. After all, the power of flight and the mastery of anatomy might suggest that humanity could achieve greatness on its own, independent of divine intervention. What was most troubling to the Templars was not the diagrams themselves, but the question they posed. What if this knowledge was not meant to be kept hidden forever? What if the time had come for it to be shared with the world? And if the knowledge did spread, what then? Would it lead to enlightenment and progress? Or would it spark chaos as the floodgates to human potential were flung wide open without the guiding hand of the Church to maintain order? So, what did they do? With the manuscripts in their hands, the Templars faced an existential dilemma. Could they risk the wrath of the Church by sharing this knowledge, or should they lock it away, hidden for future generations? The decision was not taken lightly, for the consequences of their actions would reverberate through history. But one thing was clear to the Templars. They could not simply walk away from what they had discovered. The manuscripts represented more than just forbidden knowledge. They represented the very essence of what it meant to be human. The drive to explore, to understand, to innovate. And yet, in the face of this great potential, the Templars understood that they were not ready. The world was not yet prepared for the power these designs held. So they made their decision. The manuscripts were hidden away,
their contents safeguarded by a select few. The knowledge was to be guarded, its secrets preserved in silence, awaiting the time when the world might be ready to understand it. In the meantime, the Templars returned to their role as protectors, not just of religious truth, but of a hidden legacy, one that would one day shape the world in ways no one could predict. Thus, the knowledge was passed on from one generation to the next, encoded in symbols and hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right mind to unravel its mysteries. And so the story of the Templars' hidden legacy continued, stretching across centuries, until it would eventually find its way to a man who would see the hidden patterns and understand their true potential. That man would be none other than Leonardo da Vinci. As the Templars gathered around the manuscripts beneath the Temple of Solomon, a sense of reverence settled over them. They were accustomed to their sacred duties, defending the faith, protecting the relics, and safeguarding the spiritual well-being of Christendom. Yet, as they unrolled the brittle pages of these ancient manuscripts, they faced something far more complex than they had ever encountered. It was not merely a religious artifact they had uncovered, but something that blurred the line between the sacred and the profane, the divine and the human. The manuscripts were filled with diagrams, precise, meticulous drawings that captured the imagination of every knight who dared to study them. One of the most startling illustrations depicted a flying machine. At first glance, it appeared almost fantastical. The machine was delicate, yet formidable in its design, with wings unfurled like a bird in flight. The geometry was precise, and the proportions of the wings, the body, and the mechanisms within spoke of an understanding of aerodynamics that was inconceivable in the medieval period. The Templars, who had been trained to view the natural world through the lens of faith, found themselves confronting a challenge they had not anticipated. Flight, after all, had been the domain of myth, the realm of angels and divine beings, not men. The very concept of human flight was an affront to the medieval worldview, which held that man's place was on the earth, bound by divine order. How could such a thing exist? How could such knowledge have been so far ahead of its time in an age when human ingenuity had only begun to scratch the surface of engineering?
As the knights examined the diagram more closely, they could see that it was not a mere fantasy. It was a well-thought-out blueprint. The wings were carefully designed to provide lift, and the body of the machine seemed to be balanced in such a way that it would, in theory, allow for flight. The materials required were, of course, beyond their current technological capabilities, but the very idea of human flight was now presented as a potential reality. The Templars were left with a question they had never expected to face. Were these designs truly a divine gift, or were they something more dangerous, an advancement of human knowledge that challenged the limits of their faith? But the flying machines were just the beginning. As the Templars turned the pages, they found other diagrams, machines for lifting water, complex hydraulic systems designed to move large quantities of fluid across long distances. These machines were not only advanced, but also deeply practical, and in their precision, they revealed a sophisticated understanding of fluid dynamics. At a time when water wheels and basic pumps were the height of hydraulic technology, these designs hinted at a civilization that had mastered forces the Templars were only beginning to comprehend. They weren't just artistic renderings, they were functional blueprints, meant to be constructed, not merely admired. The Templars, who had seen the marvels of medieval architecture and military siege devices, now stood before blueprints that seemed to transcend their world.
The hydraulic designs were based on the principles of leverage, pressure, and flow, using systems of pulleys and gears that, if constructed, could perform tasks that would normally require an army of laborers. Such knowledge, if put to practical use, could change the very nature of agriculture, construction, and warfare.
However, what truly shook the Templars was not the mechanical devices or the hydraulics. It was the anatomical studies that lay before them. The body of the manuscript, once thought to be a divine temple of the soul, was now viewed through an entirely different lens. These anatomical drawings were not merely artistic renderings of the human form, they were scientific studies, with every muscle, vein, and bone meticulously detailed. The Templars, whose understanding of the body had been largely shaped by theological texts, could hardly reconcile what they saw before them. These drawings revealed an understanding of the human form that surpassed any knowledge they had encountered. Each line, each curve, each muscle group was carefully examined, with notes indicating how these systems work together to create motion, to generate strength, and to maintain balance. For the Templars, this knowledge was both awe-inspiring and troubling. On one hand, they marveled at the brilliance of these ancient thinkers who had unlocked the secrets of the human body centuries before modern science would do so. On the other hand, they feared the consequences of revealing such knowledge. The Church had long held dominion over both the body and the soul, and the implications of studying the human body with such analytical detachment threatened the very foundation of ecclesiastical authority. Could this knowledge be the key to unlocking human potential, or would it lead to the disintegration of the very spiritual order they had sworn to protect? Faced with these revelations, the Templars' first instinct was to protect the knowledge they had uncovered. This was not just a matter of guarding a few manuscripts, it was about safeguarding a power so immense it could reshape the world. The Templars, men sworn to secrecy, understood that their duty extended beyond the protection of physical relics and sacred texts. They were now the guardians of knowledge, dangerous, transformative knowledge that could alter the course of history.
But how could they protect this knowledge from the world? The answer lay not in physical barriers alone, but in the creation of new, intricate layers of secrecy. The Templars, skilled in the arts of espionage and cryptography, used complex rituals and codes to ensure that only those within their inner circle could access the manuscripts. They devised elaborate ciphers, encrypting the diagrams in ways that would make them incomprehensible to anyone not trained in the Templar system of secrecy. These codes were not merely visual, they were embedded in the very structure of the manuscripts themselves, hidden in the margins and within the intricate designs. The knowledge was also protected by ritual. Only the most trusted members of the order were allowed to view the manuscripts. To become one of the chosen few, a knight would have to undergo rigorous trials, tests not just of loyalty, but of intellect. The manuscripts were kept in hidden chambers, accessible only to those who had proven themselves worthy of their secrets. These chambers were protected by both physical barriers, secret passageways and hidden doors, and by the cryptic symbols that had been inscribed on the manuscripts. But perhaps the most potent form of protection was the Templars' unwavering commitment to their mission. They knew that once revealed, this knowledge could not be contained. It could fuel revolutions, upend political systems, and challenge the very foundation of the religious authority they had sworn to uphold. And so they kept it hidden, safeguarding it not just from the prying eyes of kings and scholars, but from the world itself. Their secrecy was not born of fear, but of duty, the duty to protect knowledge that was too dangerous to be misused, too powerful to be left in the hands of those who could not understand its full implications. And in this, the Templars became more than just warriors of the faith. They became the keepers of a legacy, a secret so profound that its revelation could change the world forever. As the Templars watched the manuscripts unfurl before them,
the weight of what they had discovered settled heavily upon their minds. These weren't merely ancient drawings, abandoned thoughts of an earlier civilization. They were blueprints, a vision of the world that transcended time. Though the order was designed to safeguard Christian relics and protect the Holy Land, these manuscripts showed them something much more radical, a new understanding of the world, far beyond the spiritual realm in which they had sworn allegiance. The Templars realized they had been entrusted with the keys to a future yet to unfold.
The secrets they guarded, these revolutionary designs for flying machines, intricate hydraulic systems, and studies of human anatomy, were not meant to be shared, not yet. The Templars knew the danger of exposing such knowledge. It would spark curiosity, yes, but it would also ignite conflict, perhaps threaten the very foundations of faith. And so, after the fall of the order in 1307, these texts did not vanish, they were transferred, not in grand declarations or open exchanges, but in the shadows, moving silently between the hands of those deemed worthy of their sacred trust. The knowledge once held by the Templars did not disappear with their downfall. It was too important, too potent to fade into oblivion. After the dissolution of the order, the manuscripts found their way into the hands of new custodians, individuals and families who had long been tied to the Templars, often through marriage, alliance, or shared intellectual pursuit. These guardians were not just ordinary men and women. They were selected for their loyalty, their understanding, and their capacity to protect knowledge from those who would misuse it. The Medici family, rising in power as patrons of the Renaissance, became instrumental in this preservation. Florence, a city steeped in trade, art, and philosophy, became the perfect crucible for the slow transmission of these secrets. But it wasn't just the Medici who held this knowledge. Secret societies, deeply rooted in the esoteric traditions of the Rosicrucians and Freemasons, took up the mantle of safeguarding the Templars' intellectual legacy. These societies, with their rituals and initiations, created an intellectual network that spanned Europe. They were the keepers of forbidden knowledge, seeking not only to preserve, but also to interpret, understand, and, when the time was right, reveal. One such figure who became intimately connected with this secretive transmission was Leonardo da Vinci. Born in 1452, Leonardo was not simply an artist. He was an investigator of the natural world, a curious mind determined to understand the hidden mechanisms of life. It is here, in the very atmosphere of intellectual ferment in Renaissance Italy, that the hidden knowledge would begin to take root. While Leonardo is often regarded as a genius of his time, his work was undoubtedly influenced by the legacy of Templar secrets that had been passed to him by intellectual forebearers who too understood the delicate balance between sharing and concealing. As Europe moved into the Renaissance, the intellectual climate was ripe for new ideas. Scholars and thinkers began to distance themselves from the rigid dogma of the medieval church, embracing the concept of humanism, an intellectual movement that emphasized the potential of the human mind to shape its own destiny. It was in this environment that the knowledge passed down from the Templars began to unfold.
Leonardo da Vinci's work is often seen as the culmination of this secret intellectual lineage. His anatomical sketches, for example, which were incredibly accurate for their time, were likely inspired by the anatomical studies found in the Templar manuscripts. He wasn't merely drawing the human form from his imagination or the teachings of his contemporaries. He was refining and perfecting what had been passed down from the ancients, applying the principles found in those long-hidden texts. His studies of the human body, with an accuracy that would not be matched for centuries, allowed him to paint and sculpt figures that were more lifelike than ever before. The Templars, had they been aware, would have seen their centuries-old secrets mirrored in the masterpieces of Florence. In architecture, too, the Templars' influence was felt. Architects like Filippo Brunelleschi, who designed the groundbreaking dome of the Florence Cathedral,
employed mathematical principles that echoed the designs hidden in the Templar manuscripts. These principles, which involved complex geometry and structural integrity, laid the foundation for architectural feats that would reshape the skylines of Europe. The Renaissance was more than just a period of artistic expression. It was an intellectual movement that merged the practical and the theoretical in ways that no one had done before. The philosophical and intellectual legacy of the Templars didn't end with the Renaissance. The seeds they planted would grow into a new worldview, the scientific revolution. Thinkers like Nicolaus Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, and Johannes Kepler began to question the long-held views of the cosmos and nature. Their ideas were rooted not in blind faith, but in the application of reason and observation. It was during this time that the Templars' hidden manuscripts, through their influence on Renaissance thinkers, began to take root in the scientific community. In Copernicus's heliocentric theory and Galileo's observations of the heavens, one can see the intellectual lineage that had begun with the Templars. The manuscripts that once detailed the mechanical workings of the universe were now fueling a revolution that would change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. Galileo, with his telescope, peered into the skies, confirming that the Earth was not the center of the universe. This was not just a scientific breakthrough. It was the culmination of centuries of intellectual pursuit that had begun with a small group of men in the shadowy vaults of Jerusalem who had first looked upon knowledge that could shatter the world's understanding.
The transmission of knowledge from the Templars to the Renaissance and beyond is not a story of mere survival. It is a story of transformation. The manuscripts they protected and passed down through secret societies and families were not just preserved, they were revived, expanded, and built upon. The Renaissance thinkers, aided by these hidden secrets, would lay the groundwork for the modern world, a world driven by reason, scientific discovery, and humanist ideals. The Templars' legacy, though hidden, was vital in shaping the future of intellectual thought. Their mission to protect knowledge, though clouded in mystery, birthed a new age of exploration. As their secrets passed from one generation to the next, they were not merely protected. They were the cornerstone upon which the modern world would be built. Through the artists, scientists, and thinkers of the Renaissance, the knowledge of the past found its way into the hands of those who would change the world forever. The story of the Templars' downfall begins not on the day of their arrest, but in the decades preceding it, when the order had reached its zenith, its wealth and power a source of both admiration and jealousy. The Templars were more than just warriors. They were the keepers of sacred knowledge, financiers of crusades, and powerful figures with influence stretching from the holy cities of the East to the courts of Europe. But their rise was shadowed by a growing fear of the power they held, fear of the independence they enjoyed from both monarchs and the Church. In the early 13th century, one monarch's ambitions were about to collide with this power. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was both an ambitious ruler and a deeply indebted one. His wars had drained the coffers of France, and his ongoing conflict with England over territory and trade had placed an unsustainable strain on his resources. Philip needed money. His own treasury was nearly empty, and he looked to the Templars, who were not only wealthy, but were also the financial lifeblood of European banking, with vaults that stretched across the continent.
Philip's ambition was not merely to seize the Templars' wealth. He sought to undermine their independence, to assert his power over an institution that was not bound by the usual feudal ties. The Templars had their own wealth, lands, and military force, assets that Philip believed should belong to him. In the early years of the 14th century, with his creditors circling and his power in France growing stronger, Philip turned his attention toward the Templar order, his eyes gleaming with a single-minded vision of acquisition. But it was not simply greed that drove Philip's campaign. It was his position as the most powerful ruler in Europe, a position that seemed threatened by the Templars' autonomy. He knew that dismantling them would not only enrich him, but also solidify his dominance over the nobility, who often held their own allegiances to the Templars. Philip's political calculations, driven by both personal desire and royal ambition, led him to take drastic measures. The first strike came quietly, but with devastating effect. On Friday, October 13, 1307, King Philip, having secured the Pope's reluctant agreement, ordered the arrest of all Templars in France. The timing was deliberate, an attempt to shatter the Templars in one fell swoop, isolating them from their fellow knights across Europe. French soldiers raided their castles, arresting thousands of knights, including the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. Those who resisted were tortured, forced to confess heresy, sodomy, and a range of other charges designed to discredit them. The knights who had once been the pinnacle of chivalry were now portrayed as blasphemers, perverts, and traitors to Christendom. Pope Clement V, caught in Philip's web of power, was reluctantly dragged into the conspiracy. Though a man of the Church, Clement found himself increasingly powerless in the face of the king's wrath and coercion. Unable to resist Philip's pressure, Clement issued a papal bull, formally disbanding the order in 1312 and endorsing the accusations against them. This papal decree, combined with the widespread arrests, led to the Templars' brutal dismantling across Christendom. The Templars, once a symbol of Christian valor, had been shattered not by the sword, but by a political coup masked as a religious inquisition. Yet even as they were broken, the Templars did not relinquish the knowledge they had guarded for centuries.
Though the Templars were publicly persecuted and disbanded, their intellectual legacy, the most valuable aspect of their order, remained intact. A few Templars, particularly those in high places, understood the dangers of this knowledge falling into the wrong hands. They had seen firsthand how their wealth and political influence had drawn the ire of the most powerful ruler in Europe, and now they knew that their manuscripts, filled with secrets of engineering, anatomy, and even early flight, were more precious than gold. The Templars had long established secret routes for their most important manuscripts, hidden in secluded castles, remote monasteries, and libraries across Europe. Noble families, loyal to the order, took it upon themselves to safeguard the secrets. These families, some of whom had long-standing connections to the Templars through alliances and marriages, ensured that the manuscripts would survive. In some cases, they hid the manuscripts in plain sight, weaving them into libraries or religious collections where they would remain undisturbed for centuries. Among the most significant families who played this role were the Medici of Florence and the Fugger family of Germany. These noble houses, known for their wealth and influence, became the intellectual custodians of Templar knowledge. But it wasn't just the wealth of these families that allowed them to safeguard the manuscripts. It was their deep ties to secret societies, like the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, who had long been tasked with preserving ancient wisdom. These societies, whether consciously or unknowingly, acted as bridges between the knowledge of the past and the intellectual movements of the future. In the decades that followed the Templars' fall, Europe began to enter a period of transformation. The Renaissance was born in the ashes of the medieval world, fueled by a renewed interest in the classics and a shift toward humanism. But beneath the surface, the legacy of the Templars lived on, quietly informing the work of artists, architects, and scientists who would change the world.
It was not merely by coincidence that figures like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Filippo Brunelleschi embraced principles of mathematics, engineering, and anatomy in their work. They were, in part, influenced by the knowledge passed down from the Templars, knowledge that had been carefully preserved by those who understood its importance. The Templars' manuscripts, once concealed within the walls of noble houses and secret societies, found their way into the hands of Renaissance thinkers, sparking a revolution in art, architecture, and science.
In the anatomical drawings of Leonardo and the architectural designs of Brunelleschi, one can trace the influence of Templar knowledge. The secrets of hydraulic engineering, anatomy, and mechanical design, once hidden away by the order, became the foundation upon which the Renaissance would build. The Templars, even in their final days, had ensured that their legacy would live on.
In the small Tuscan village of Vinci, nestled among the rolling hills of the Italian countryside, a child was born in 1452 whose name would one day echo through the annals of history. Leonardo da Vinci, the illegitimate son of Piero da Vinci, a notary, and Caterina, a peasant woman, grew up in a world that offered him both promise and limitation. His birth, a consequence of an affair between his father and mother, placed him outside the sphere of legitimate inheritance. Yet, in a way, this very social position would shape the course of his life, cultivating within him an outsider's perspective that would ultimately fuel his drive for knowledge, freedom, and creative exploration. Unlike his legitimate half-siblings, Leonardo was not granted an aristocratic position. However, his father's status as a respected notary in the village allowed young Leonardo access to education that was unavailable to most peasants. Piero, recognizing his son's innate intellectual curiosity, arranged for him to receive a rudimentary education, one that exposed him to the basics of reading, writing, and mathematics. However, this early exposure to the written word would prove to be only a prelude to what would truly captivate his mind, the natural world. Leonardo's childhood in Vinci was one filled with long walks through fields and forests, where he became intimately acquainted with the world around him. These early interactions with nature, whether it was the flight of birds or the flow of water in a stream, left an indelible mark on his mind. As a young boy, he wandered the Tuscan hills, sketching the landscape, meticulously observing the way light fell on the leaves, the textures of rock, and the movement of animals. This obsessive attention to detail would become one of his hallmarks, influencing not just his art, but his scientific observations and inventions. It was not merely his surroundings, but his illegitimate status that spurred a sense of isolation in Leonardo. As someone who did not fully belong to the aristocracy, Leonardo understood the world from a perspective of outsider status. This would shape his later desire to question conventional boundaries, to go beyond the confines of traditional thought, and to pursue knowledge that often transgressed the established norms of the time. His social exclusion helped him develop a deep sense of curiosity, a yearning to understand the world that went beyond the superficial.
The Renaissance was an age of rebirth, a cultural and intellectual revolution that sought to rediscover the wisdom of ancient Greece and Rome. Born in the midst of this period, Leonardo was not only a product of his time, but one of its most brilliant architects. The early years of the Renaissance were marked by the growth of humanism, a philosophy that emphasized the potential of human intellect and the exploration of the natural world. It was a period in which art, science, and philosophy were no longer seen as separate endeavors, but interconnected parts of a unified whole. Florence, the beating heart of the Italian Renaissance, was a city of incredible intellectual vibrancy, and it was here that Leonardo's genius began to truly take form. Under the patronage of the Medici family, Florence was home to some of the most brilliant minds of the time. The Medici, who had risen from humble origins to become powerful patrons of the arts, recognized the value of creative talent, and their influence extended far beyond the world of painting. Artists, scientists, architects, and philosophers gathered in Florence, forming a rich intellectual ecosystem. In this environment, Leonardo found himself in the company of thinkers like Filippo Brunelleschi, Donatello, and Botticelli. Brunelleschi's engineering marvels, especially his design for the dome of the Florence Cathedral, deeply influenced Leonardo's understanding of both architecture and perspective. Donatello's sculptures, with their lifelike portrayals of the human form, would inspire Leonardo's own anatomical studies. And the works of the ancient Greeks and Romans, which were being rediscovered during this period, helped shape Leonardo's understanding of the human body and the universe. More than just a hub for artists, Florence was also home to scholars who sought to bring science and the human experience to the forefront. Leonardo's curiosity about nature, combined with his access to the best intellectual minds of his time, created a perfect storm for the flourishing of his genius. His early exposure to Vitruvius, the ancient Roman architect, influenced his understanding of human proportion and the relationship between the body and architecture. Mathematics, geometry, and natural observation all came together in the works of Leonardo, and his art became an expression of the scientific as much as the aesthetic. In Florence, ideas were alive and evolving, and Leonardo's mind was a sponge, soaking up not only the intellectual trends of the time, but also the very nature of human creativity and inquiry. The city's cultural and intellectual milieu, with its deep respect for classical knowledge and its growing enthusiasm for human potential, was the ideal environment for Leonardo's genius to blossom. It was here that he began to merge his artistic talents with his desire to understand the world scientifically. His studies in anatomy, engineering, and botany were not separate from his artistic endeavors. They were intertwined, each discipline feeding into the other.
Florence was the incubator of Leonardo's genius, providing him with the resources, mentors, and intellectual climate he needed to push the boundaries of art and science. And it was here, amid the intellectual revolution of the Renaissance, that Leonardo began his journey not only as an artist, but as one of history's greatest polymaths, whose work would forever change the way humanity viewed the world. At the age of 14, Leonardo da Vinci entered the renowned workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the most influential artists and sculptors in Renaissance Florence. The city, at the time, was not just a political center, but a flourishing crucible of intellectual, artistic, and scientific development. In Verrocchio's workshop, Leonardo would be exposed to an environment that was both structured and dynamic, where ideas from diverse disciplines merged into groundbreaking creations. Verrocchio's workshop was a place where the rigid boundaries between different crafts, painting, sculpture, and mechanics, did not exist. Here, Leonardo was introduced to the principles of engineering, mechanical design, and the anatomical study of the human body, all of which would profoundly influence his later works. The apprenticeship was structured yet informal by modern standards. Leonardo, like other apprentices, was tasked with assisting on various projects, often working on background figures in larger compositions and learning the technical skills of drawing, modeling, and mixing paints. But what set Leonardo apart from his peers was his curiosity and intellectual drive. While other apprentices may have been content with mastering technique, Leonardo sought to understand why things appeared as they did, why light fell a certain way, why human figures moved the way they did, and how nature worked. His early works, like the Baptism of Christ, reveal this intense observational curiosity. In this painting, Leonardo was entrusted with painting one of the angels, an almost unassuming role. Yet Leonardo's contribution was anything but conventional. The angel he painted is a revelation of naturalism. It is not simply an angel standing in a fixed, stylized position, but a living, breathing entity that exudes a delicate, almost ethereal quality.
His angel is in motion, draped in flowing fabric that swirls with the suggestion of wind, and its face carries an expression of emotion. An angel not only with a sacred duty, but one that seems to carry the weight of its own humanity. This focus on emotion and motion, combined with the light and shadow techniques, set Leonardo apart from Verrocchio's other assistants. His work was not simply about replicating what was seen, but about understanding the mechanics of life itself. The contrast between Verrocchio's static figures and Leonardo's dynamic angel marked the first signs of what would become a signature style, the ability to make the unseen visible. The baptism of Christ also revealed Leonardo's growing interest in the study of anatomy. He was already dissecting human cadavers, attempting to learn the underlying structures of the body in order to paint figures with accurate proportions. This dedication to anatomical precision was revolutionary at the time and became one of the defining features of his later works like the Vitruvian Man and the figures in the Last Supper. As Leonardo continued to work under Verrocchio, he was exposed to a variety of artistic and technical projects, some of which required an engineering mindset. Verrocchio himself was not only an artist, but also an engineer, sculptor, and inventor, and his influence would be seen in Leonardo's later mechanical designs. This blending of artistic and technical skills set the stage for Leonardo's later accomplishments, where his art and science were inseparable. The dynamic between Leonardo da Vinci and his master, Andrea del Verrocchio, was complex and multifaceted. Verrocchio, a celebrated artist of his time, saw in Leonardo a remarkable talent, one that could push the boundaries of their craft. It is often said that Verrocchio, upon seeing the angel Leonardo painted in the baptism of Christ, was so struck by the brilliance of his apprentice that he swore never to paint again. This reaction, while likely an expression of admiration, also reflected the tension that often arose between master and pupil in Renaissance Florence, especially when the pupil began to outshine the master. The relationship between the two men was one of mentorship, but it was also one of competition. While Verrocchio was a skilled artist and teacher, his traditional approach to art, focused on rigid lines and symbolic representation, began to seem increasingly outdated as Leonardo's innovations and naturalistic methods took hold. The tension was not personal, rather it was the result of Leonardo's unique approach to learning. Verrocchio, though a brilliant craftsman, adhered to conventional methods, whereas Leonardo constantly sought to expand the boundaries of knowledge, whether through art, science, or engineering. Leonardo's contributions to Verrocchio's projects grew more significant as his mastery of anatomy, geometry, and light became evident. The apprenticeship was not merely an artistic one, it was a comprehensive multidisciplinary education. Leonardo's ability to blend art with science, beauty with accuracy, and emotion with movement began to make him stand out in ways that made Verrocchio's other students seem limited in comparison. An anecdote that encapsulates this relationship is found in the Annunciation, one of Leonardo's early independent works. It is said that Verrocchio, when seeing this painting, was astounded by the level of realism and emotional depth Leonardo had achieved, particularly in the way he portrayed the landscape and the human figures. His figures were not stiff or posed, they seemed alive, breathing, and fully engaged with their environment. This ability to capture movement in stillness was unlike anything Verrocchio had taught him.
The influence of Verrocchio's workshop on Leonardo cannot be underestimated. It was under Verrocchio's guidance that Leonardo first began to push the limits of art, experimenting with light, shadow, and proportions in ways that no one had before. Yet as the years passed, it became clear that Leonardo's path would eventually diverge from his mentors. While Verrocchio remained grounded in the traditional methods of the past, Leonardo would come to reshape the future of both art and science, proving that genius cannot be confined by the boundaries of tradition. Leonardo da Vinci's genius was defined not by the traditional boundaries of art and science, but by the remarkable way he bridged the two domains often seen as separate, but, in his view, inseparable. For Leonardo, art and science were both means of understanding and representing the world. Where others saw a divide between the creative and the analytical, Leonardo saw a harmony. one that could reveal deeper truths about both the human condition and the natural world. In an era where art was primarily concerned with depicting idealized beauty and spiritual symbolism, Leonardo sought to portray the world as it truly was, with a deep commitment to realism and precision. Yet this realism was not achieved through observation alone. It was the result of his scientific inquiries, his relentless study of anatomy, his observations of natural phenomena, and his experiments with mechanics. For Leonardo, every painting, every sculpture was not merely an aesthetic exercise, but an opportunity to observe, analyze, and understand the forces that shaped the world. His approach to anatomy provides the clearest example of this fusion. Leonardo's early studies of the human body were not undertaken solely for artistic reasons. They were attempts to unlock the secrets of life itself. His dissections were scientific experiments conducted with the same precision and curiosity that a naturalist might apply in the study of plants or animals. Yet, for Leonardo, the human body was not just a biological system. It was the source of expression, the vessel of emotion, and the key to understanding movement. He believed that by understanding the mechanics of the body, he could elevate his art to a higher level, creating figures that were not just beautiful, but alive, filled with energy and humanity. This philosophy extended beyond the human form. Leonardo's observations of nature, whether of a bird in flight or the patterns of water, were deeply scientific but also artistic in their goal of representation. His detailed studies of bird wings were not just anatomical, they were a guide to designing machines capable of flight. His work in mechanical engineering and hydraulics, like his designs for a flying machine or a water-powered pump, were driven by the same desire to mimic nature in all its complexity. He sought to use science to inform art, and to use art as a means of exploring and explaining the world. Leonardo's art was thus a form of scientific inquiry. When he painted the Mona Lisa, he did not merely capture a woman's face. He sought to understand how light fell on skin, how shadows defined form, how the muscles of the face interacted to create emotion. He was painting physics as much as he was painting a person. His study of perspective, his attention to light and shadow, and his use of geometry were all informed by the same methodical, scientific mind that would later produce designs for machines and dissect human cadavers.
In essence, Leonardo's belief was that art and science were two sides of the same coin. Both were tools for uncovering the deeper truths of existence, and neither could fully succeed without the other. His anatomical studies, his engineering designs, and his paintings were all born from the same fundamental curiosity, the desire to understand, to represent, and to transcend the limits of human knowledge. At the heart of Leonardo da Vinci's revolutionary approach to art and science lay his anatomical studies, a body of work that challenged conventional understandings of human anatomy and set the stage for later medical advancements. In an age when dissection was not only a taboo, but also a rarity, Leonardo's commitment to exploring the human body through dissection and detailed observation was groundbreaking, both scientifically and artistically. Unlike many of his contemporaries who relied on the dissection of animals or outdated texts, Leonardo dissected human cadavers, seeking to understand the inner workings of the body with precision. His dissections were not simply an attempt to document the human form, they were an investigation into the laws of life. He was particularly interested in understanding muscles, bones, and organs, and how these systems interacted to enable human movement and function. His sketches of the human heart were especially notable, as they revealed the circulatory system in ways that were centuries ahead of their time. Leonardo's studies of the human brain were equally remarkable. He made one of the first accurate depictions of the cerebellum and ventricles, recognizing its importance in motion control. These anatomical studies went far beyond artistic interest. They had a profound impact on medical science, providing a basis for later anatomical research. Many of his drawings would later be rediscovered in the 19th century and were found to be incredibly accurate in light of modern anatomical knowledge. For Leonardo, these anatomical studies were an integral part of his artistic practice. The more he understood the structure of the body, the better he could represent it in his paintings and sculptures. His detailed observations of muscle movement, for instance, directly influenced his ability to capture the fluidity of motion in his figures. In works like the Vitruvian Man, Leonardo applied his knowledge of human proportion and geometry, creating a figure that was not only an artistic representation of the ideal human form, but also a scientific model of balance and symmetry. His anatomical studies were also crucial in his ability to capture human emotion. Leonardo's keen understanding of muscles allowed him to depict the subtleties of expression. How a slight shift in the muscles of the face could convey profound emotional states. This mastery of human expression is most famously seen in the Mona Lisa, where the subtle play of light on her face, combined with her ambiguous smile, has puzzled and intrigued viewers for centuries. Leonardo's ability to capture emotion in a static figure was due in large part to his scientific understanding of how emotions manifest in the body.
These studies were not confined to Leonardo's studio. His anatomical drawings had a lasting influence on later medical practitioners, and some of his designs for mechanical models, such as his flying machine, were rooted in the understanding he gained from his anatomical explorations of flight. For example, his observations of bird wings and how they functioned influenced his designs for mechanical wings. In this way, his anatomical studies were deeply interdisciplinary, crossing the boundaries between art, medicine, and engineering. Leonardo da Vinci's anatomical studies, therefore, were not just groundbreaking for their time, they were ahead of their time. They not only transformed his artistic techniques, making them more realistic and emotionally resonant, but they also laid the groundwork for the development of modern anatomy and contributed significantly to medical knowledge. His work stands as a testament to the power of interdisciplinary thinking, where the lines between art and science are not merely blurred, but completely erased. Leonardo da Vinci's works are often described as windows into the unknown, not only because of their aesthetic brilliance, but because of the hidden knowledge embedded within them. From the Mona Lisa to the Last Supper, Leonardo was not only capturing the external world, but also weaving deeper meanings into his paintings, meanings that reveal his understanding of human nature, mathematics, and cosmology, alongside possible esoteric traditions passed down through secretive groups like the Templars. Take the Last Supper, for example. On the surface, it is a depiction of Christ's final meal with his disciples. However, beneath the surface lies a complex web of symbolism. The geometry of the scene is precise. Christ is placed at the center, surrounded by the apostles, with the vanishing point directly at his head, symbolizing the divine center. The three groups of apostles on either side of Christ not only reflect symbolic triads, Trinity, but each disciple's gesture corresponds to the philosophical archetypes of reason, faith, and doubt.
What makes Leonardo's depiction of Christ and his apostles so profound is the subtle messages woven into the symbolism. Some theorists suggest that Leonardo encoded a deeper spiritual truth, one that links divine mystery with humanity through numerology and allegory. The arrangement of the apostles and the calibration of space is believed by some to reference not only Christian themes, but also Templar symbolism, which carried with it knowledge of ancient sacred geometry, astronomy, and philosophy. While much of this speculation is debatable, it's clear that Leonardo's art was not only about presenting religious subjects, but about weaving a web of hidden knowledge, mathematical, philosophical, and esoteric. Similarly, in the Mona Lisa, there is more than just a portrait of a woman.
The smile of the Mona Lisa is one of the most famous symbols in art history, often described as mysterious or enigmatic. But beyond its elusive quality, Leonardo's understanding of the human soul, his belief in the connection between inner emotion and outward expression, suggests that this smile could represent not just the mystery of the subject, but the universality of human emotion. The use of atmospheric perspective, where the background recedes into a hazy landscape, may allude to the spiritual aspect of the subject's character. Here, as in many of Leonardo's works, there is a clear mathematical structure, from the proportions of the face to the placement of the figure, that reflects the harmony of the universe itself. These hidden layers of meaning are not just stylistic flourishes. Leonardo's inclusion of numerological symbols, esoteric codes, and geometric structures might suggest that he was more than just an artist, he was a guardian of knowledge. As someone deeply connected to the Templar traditions, whose secrets often included ancient teachings on the unification of art, science, and the divine, Leonardo might have encoded these hidden truths within his paintings to preserve them for future generations. Leonardo's art may have served as both a mirror and a map, reflecting both the outer world and the hidden inner workings of the universe, blending philosophy, mathematics, and mysticism. At the heart of Leonardo da Vinci's work lies an obsession with geometry, proportions, and balance, principles that were not just artistic tools, but reflections of his understanding of the cosmic order. For Leonardo, mathematical and aesthetic principles were inseparable. He believed that the rules of nature were governed by mathematical laws, and that these laws could be understood and represented through art. Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, perhaps his most iconic drawing, is a perfect example of his belief in the unity of art and science. Inspired by the ancient architect Vitruvius, Leonardo used the human form to illustrate the golden ratio, a mathematical proportion that he believed governed the universe. The figure of the Vitruvian Man, inscribed within both a circle and a square, embodies the concept of balance and harmony, where the proportions of the human body reflect the geometric laws of the universe. The drawing represents not only Leonardo's deep understanding of anatomy, but also his philosophical view that the human body was a microcosm of the larger cosmos. This understanding of geometry permeated Leonardo's art, where mathematical principles were used to create visual harmony. In The Last Supper, Leonardo used perspective, the mathematical technique that revolutionized art, to create a sense of depth and realism that had never been seen before. The vanishing point at the center of the painting, located at Christ's head, is a symbolic and spatial representation of Christ as the center of the universe. The use of symmetry and proportionality in arranging the apostles in the background further elevates the spiritual significance of the scene. In the Mona Lisa, Leonardo applied the golden ratio to create a composition that was mathematically pleasing, yet simultaneously imbued with a sense of mystery. The proportions of Mona Lisa's face, her eyes, and her hands all adhere to this divine proportion, creating a sense of harmony that resonates with the viewer. More than just a technical achievement, this mathematical precision in the Mona Lisa reflects Leonardo's belief that true beauty could only be achieved through an understanding of nature's fundamental rules. Moreover, Leonardo's studies of human anatomy were not just for artistic purposes, but to better understand the geometry of the body. In his detailed anatomy drawings, he observed the proportions of the muscles, bones, and nerves, analyzing how they influenced movement and expression. His fascination with the human form was deeply rooted in mathematics. He saw the human body as a perfect machine, governed by the same laws that govern the natural world. In these ways, Leonardo's art was not just a form of self-expression, it was a scientific inquiry into the laws of the universe. By embedding mathematical principles and geometric harmony into his paintings, Leonardo was not simply creating beauty. He was revealing the hidden order of nature, aligning his art with the cosmic laws that govern the physical and spiritual realms.
Leonardo da Vinci was, by all measures, a Renaissance man. But his mechanical designs are perhaps one of his most fascinating and overlooked legacies. Visionary in both concept and execution, Leonardo's machines were not simply artistic projects, but also profound engineering feats that reflected his deep understanding of nature's mechanics, human potential, and the world's physical laws. From flying machines to hydraulic systems and war machines, his designs were so far ahead of their time that they often seemed more like futuristic fantasies than practical inventions. At the heart of Leonardo's mechanical genius was his intimate connection to nature. His study of birds in flight led to his designs for an ornithopter, a flying machine powered by human effort to flap its wings. He did not just conceptualize the machine, he studied the musculature and anatomy of birds, drawing detailed observations about how they generated lift and thrust. In this sense, Leonardo did not simply invent. He sought to emulate nature, to recreate the natural world's brilliance through human ingenuity. His ornithopter design, while impractical due to the lack of power in the human body to generate sufficient lift, is a perfect example of how Leonardo approached innovation, deeply rooted in the observations of life forms and their mechanics. In addition to flying machines, Leonardo's designs for war machines reflect the political landscape of Renaissance Italy, a time of constant warring city-states and military conflict. His armored vehicle, often described as an early prototype of the tank, is one of his most celebrated inventions. The tank was a circular armored vehicle designed to carry soldiers into battle, offering protection from arrows, swords, and other weapons of the time. The design included rotating turrets and weaponry, making it a precursor to modern armored vehicles. While this vehicle was never built, Leonardo's designs for armor and siege weapons showed an understanding of defensive warfare that anticipated modern military strategies. His focus on mobility and protection would have made it a formidable machine, had it been possible to construct it.
Beyond warfare, Leonardo's hydraulic systems were equally revolutionary. Inspired by the natural flow of water, Leonardo designed several water-powered mills and pumps, some of which could have been used to power machinery or grind grain. His water-lifting devices were based on the principles of leverage and mechanical advantage, reflecting his desire to harness nature's power for human use. These designs were particularly advanced for their time, laying the groundwork for future developments in hydraulic engineering. What sets Leonardo apart from other Renaissance inventors was his ability to merge mechanics with aesthetic considerations. His inventions were not just functional, they were beautiful, with an elegance that matched their purpose. The geometry and proportions that defined his paintings were also evident in his machines, which were often crafted with meticulous attention to symmetry and balance. Leonardo's mechanical designs were as much about understanding the laws of nature as they were about solving practical problems. His ability to blend these two worlds is a testament to his unique genius. The practical applications of his inventions may have been limited by the technology of his time, but the ideas he put forward were far ahead of their time. Many of his designs, such as the flying machine and armored tank, were only realized centuries later with the advent of modern technology. In this way, Leonardo was not only an artist and a scientist, but a true pioneer of engineering whose visionary ideas continue to influence modern inventors and technologists. Leonardo's fascination with flight was more than a mere curiosity. It was a lifelong obsession that encapsulated his belief in the power of human ingenuity to conquer the natural world. It is said that Leonardo often looked at birds soaring overhead and dreamed of becoming like them, unbound by gravity, free to explore the heavens. But his desire to understand flight was not just born from this romantic notion.
It was grounded in his deep scientific curiosity and philosophical desire to understand the forces that govern the universe.
The origins of Leonardo's study of flight can be traced back to his observations of birds, particularly their anatomy and the way their wings allowed them to navigate the sky. He spent hours dissecting bird wings, studying their muscles, bones, and feathers to understand how they worked. He closely examined how birds adjusted their wings to achieve lift and maneuverability, and how their skeletal structure supported their ability to fly. This attention to detail allowed him to design the ornithopter, a human-powered flying machine with flapping wings, which he believed could replicate the flight of birds. The ornithopter, with its large wings that mimicked the flapping motion of birds, was a remarkable design that demonstrated Leonardo's understanding of the physics of flight. The machine, however, could never have been built with the technology available in Leonardo's time. The power-to-weight ratio simply didn't exist to enable human-powered flight. Yet the concept of a flying machine was groundbreaking and would influence later inventors, such as the Wright brothers, hundreds of years later. In addition to the ornithopter, Leonardo also sketched designs for an aerial screw, often considered a precursor to the helicopter. The aerial screw was a large spiral-shaped device intended to lift off the ground by rotational force. Though it was never constructed, the design was an early attempt at understanding vertical flight. Leonardo's use of the spiral reflected his fascination with natural forms and his understanding of how a rotating motion could generate lift, foreshadowing the principles of modern helicopter technology. Leonardo's exploration of flight mechanics wasn't limited to human-powered machines. He also studied the physics of aerodynamics, attempting to understand how the air interacts with flying objects. He theorized about the force of drag, the importance of wing shape, and the dynamics of flight, concepts that would not be fully understood until the development of modern aviation. His experiments in flight were not mere flights of fancy. They were methodical studies based on a rigorous understanding of nature's laws. Through his experiments, Leonardo sought to understand the very essence of flight, not just as a mechanical challenge, but as a philosophical pursuit. To Leonardo, flight represented the ultimate triumph of human intellect over nature's limitations. It was his way of transcending the boundaries of the human body and defying the forces that kept humanity grounded. In his sketches and designs, we see the convergence of science, art, and philosophy, with Leonardo constantly pushing the limits of what was possible.
While Leonardo's flight designs were not realized in his lifetime, they left behind a legacy that would influence the course of history. His understanding of aerodynamics, his mechanical designs, and his imaginative spirit paved the way for future generations of engineers and aviators. Leonardo's desire to conquer the skies was a reflection of his broader belief in the limitless potential of human creativity and innovation, a belief that would inspire countless others to dream big and soar higher. Leonardo da Vinci's fascination with the human body was driven by an insatiable quest for knowledge, a desire to understand the intricate mechanics of life itself. His anatomical studies were not mere artistic exercises, but profound inquiries into the nature of existence, and they would go on to reshape the way we understand both the human form and the world around us. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the dissection of human cadavers was not only a controversial and taboo practice, but also one fraught with religious and social challenges. The Catholic Church, which held significant sway over intellectual life, condemned such practices, viewing them as an affront to the sanctity of the human body, which was believed to be created in the image of God. Leonardo, however, felt bound to challenge this doctrine in the name of scientific truth.
driven by his belief that to truly understand the world, one must go beyond the surface and uncover the deeper mechanisms that govern life. He embarked on a path that few dared to tread. For years, he secretly dissected human cadavers, making meticulous drawings and notes of his findings. He conducted more than 30 dissections, often working in secrecy to avoid church scrutiny. His observations and sketches of the muscles, bones, organs, and blood vessels were revolutionary. His knowledge was far ahead of his contemporaries, and many of his findings were not fully understood or appreciated until centuries later. For example, Leonardo made critical discoveries about the circulatory system, documenting the path of blood through the heart and noting the functions of the valves. He also studied the nervous system, producing some of the most accurate drawings of the brain, spinal cord, and nerves, laying the foundation for future studies in neurology and neuroscience.
In terms of muscle anatomy, Leonardo's detailed observations were groundbreaking. He was one of the first to accurately describe the muscles of the human face and how they facilitated expression. This knowledge would later inform his art, helping him create dynamic, emotionally charged figures. Yet, his work in anatomy was not merely about accurate representation. It was about understanding life's fundamental processes. For Leonardo, the human body was not just a subject for artistic depiction, but a machine, an intricate system of parts that could only be understood by looking closely at each individual piece. Leonardo's documentation of these findings is what sets his anatomical studies apart. He used mirror writing, a technique that would ensure his notes could only be read by those who truly understood his work. His notebooks, filled with thousands of drawings and descriptions, were a secret repository of knowledge that would influence generations of artists, scientists, and physicians long after his death. These writings represented Leonardo's commitment to preserving his discoveries, a desire to pass on knowledge that would transcend his own lifetime. In these private sketches, he combined art, science, and philosophy, creating a body of work that was as much about intellectual exploration as it was about the art of representation. The risks he took, defying religious and societal norms to pursue knowledge, were significant. In his time, it was not only dangerous to challenge the Church's teachings, but also socially unacceptable. Yet Leonardo's relentless pursuit of knowledge led him to a deep understanding of the human body that transcended the boundaries of his time. The anatomical discoveries he made would not be fully validated until centuries later, but they laid the foundation for future developments in medicine, surgery, and biology. Leonardo's anatomical studies had a profound influence on his art, enabling him to depict the human body in ways that had never been seen before. His knowledge of anatomy, gleaned from dissecting cadavers and studying the mechanics of muscles, bones, and organs, directly informed his ability to render the human form with unprecedented accuracy and realism. Perhaps the most iconic example of Leonardo's anatomical knowledge applied to his art is his famous drawing, Vitruvian Man. This illustration, based on the principles set out by the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius, shows a man with his arms and legs outstretched within a circle and a square, symbolizing the ideal human proportions. But Leonardo did not simply adhere to Vitruvius's measurements, he used his own anatomical studies to ensure that the proportions were not just ideal, but biologically accurate. The Vitruvian Man is a perfect example of Leonardo's ability to combine mathematical precision and biological accuracy to create a figure that embodies the harmony of the human body and the universal principles governing the natural world. In works like the Mona Lisa and The Last Supper, Leonardo applied his anatomical knowledge to create figures that were not only lifelike, but emotionally real.
His study of muscle movement and facial expressions allowed him to depict the subtle nuances of human emotion in a way that was groundbreaking for the time. In the Mona Lisa, for example, her enigmatic smile has been the subject of countless analyses. It is not just a static expression, it seems to change depending on the viewer's angle, and this is due to Leonardo's understanding of how the facial muscles work together to convey emotion. The smile, which has become the symbol of her mystery, is the result of Leonardo's knowledge of how a muscle can shift to create multiple expressions. Similarly, in The Last Supper, Leonardo's ability to depict human movement and emotion is a direct result of his anatomical studies. The way each apostle reacts to Christ's announcement that one of them will betray him shows the subtle interplay of emotion and physical response. This level of realism was groundbreaking for the time, as artists before Leonardo had often rendered human figures as static, symbolic representations, not as dynamic, living beings. Leonardo's understanding of the body's mechanics also allowed him to represent movement with unparalleled realism. His studies of the musculature and skeletal structure were not only artistic, they were scientific observations that informed the way his figures moved. This is most evident in works such as The Battle of Anghiari, a mural depicting a dynamic scene of battle where the muscle structure of the horses and warriors conveys action and emotion in a way that had never been done before.
In each of these works, Leonardo's ability to merge anatomy with art elevated the human body from a mere subject of representation to a living, breathing entity, one that could convey emotion, motion, and life itself. His understanding of the anatomical systems, from the circulatory system to the muscles of the face, allowed him to create works that not only captured the external appearance of the human body, but also its internal soul. In the codices, Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, we encounter not merely sketches or designs, but a visionary blueprint that traces his intellectual evolution, a mind at the height of Renaissance curiosity, committed to uncovering nature's secrets. These notebooks, filled with diagrams, sketches, and observations, are not only records of artistic process, but represent Leonardo's deepest intellectual explorations into the mechanics of the world around him. His approach to learning was not linear, but rather a continuous cycle of questioning, experimenting, and observing. Leonardo's process of documentation was a dynamic pursuit of truth, often done through observation and recording. Unlike many contemporaries who sought to accumulate and pass on knowledge, Leonardo's work was a living dialogue with the natural world. He never stopped learning and never stopped drawing. He saw his notebooks as spaces of experimentation, each page a trial, each sketch a potential answer or hypothesis. This was the genius of his interdisciplinary approach. Leonardo was constantly cross-pollinating his knowledge of anatomy, engineering, mechanics, and art. Where others wrote theoretical treatises or made observational notes, Leonardo turned his notebooks into active spaces of inquiry. Rather than simply sketching the world, he interrogated it. His drawings of the human body were not just artistic renderings. They were visual experiments in understanding muscle structure, movement, and functionality. For example, when sketching the human heart, Leonardo didn't merely reproduce it, he dissected it, traced the blood vessels, and theorized its mechanical function. This approach demonstrates how Leonardo's learning was rooted in the process of exploration, where documentation was part of the experiential process of discovery. His method wasn't about mastering a field, it was about redefining the way knowledge could be understood and applied. He used his notebooks to chart ideas that weren't confined to their disciplinary boundaries, but crossed the lines between art, science, and engineering. They served as both an artistic record and a scientific exploration, revealing how the two were inseparable in Leonardo's view.
He believed that true understanding of nature required both creative expression and rigorous study, a belief that underscored his approach to all areas of knowledge.
Leonardo's notebooks were also intensely personal, each page a direct window into his thoughts and ideas. They were his private experiments, often written in mirror writing, perhaps a method of safeguarding his ideas, or even simply a personal quirk. This is a powerful testament to how Leonardo's work was not meant for immediate approval or public consumption, but for his own intellectual satisfaction. These notebooks were places where knowledge could be pursued freely, without censorship, allowing for ideas to be tested, refined, and reimagined over time. Among the codices, the Codex Atlanticus and Codex Leicester stand out as monumental records of Leonardo's inventive genius. They hold the key to understanding Leonardo's intellectual pursuits, documenting his innovations and observations that bridged the gap between art, engineering, and science. These notebooks were not just records of isolated discoveries, they were the products of a man whose mind constantly moved between disciplines, whose inventions anticipated technologies that would only come to fruition centuries later. In the Codex Atlanticus, one finds Leonardo's designs for machines that were far ahead of his time. The aerial screw, which many now recognize as an early conceptualization of the helicopter, is one of the most famous designs. Leonardo's design featured a spiral shape, intended to lift off the ground by rotating through the air. While unrealizable in his era, it speaks to his intuitive understanding of flight mechanics and his ability to see beyond the technological constraints of his time. In the same codex, Leonardo's mechanical inventions extend to designs for war machines and hydraulic systems. His self-propelled cart, often considered the first draft of the automobile, demonstrates his deep understanding of mechanical power. By designing a vehicle that could move without horses, Leonardo was looking ahead to an age of automated transportation, another glimpse of his remarkable foresight. His hydraulic machines, meanwhile, were intended to harness the power of water, using gears, pulleys, and levers to generate movement, a concept that would later underpin the development of water-driven engines and hydropower systems. The Codex Leicester, though smaller in scope, holds its own significance in revealing Leonardo's scientific curiosity. It is here that he explored the flow of water, the behavior of light, and the movement of celestial bodies. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Codex is his studies on the tides and the moon's influence on them, an early exploration into the forces of gravity. This observation would not be fully understood until the work of later scientists like Newton, but Leonardo's notes point to a deep, intuitive grasp of natural forces that governed not just the physical world, but the universe.
The codices reveal a mind not content with superficial knowledge, but one that sought truth in every corner of the world. Leonardo's notebooks were the record of a lifetime spent in interdisciplinary exploration, where art and science were inseparable, each one feeding the other. The sketches of anatomical studies led to mechanical designs, while his engineering inventions were driven by a vision of a world where technology and humanity could exist in perfect harmony. These notebooks are not simply a record of what Leonardo thought, but a demonstration of how he thought, through experimentation, observation, and a constant drive to connect the world's natural systems. Through the codices, Leonardo's mind remains alive, forever revealing his endless pursuit of knowledge, a pursuit that transcended his time and continues to influence the fields of art, engineering, and science. Leonardo da Vinci was not simply a man of incompleteness, he was a man of unbounded vision. The very brilliance that made him a genius also created the personal struggles that would define much of his career. Throughout his life, Leonardo was driven by an intense desire to capture not just the external beauty of nature, but also its intricate, invisible mechanisms. Yet in his quest to understand the world in its deepest form, he was forever caught between creation and destruction, unable to reconcile his desire for perfection with the limitations of time, materials, and human ability. One of the greatest struggles Leonardo faced was the inability to finish his projects, a theme that pervaded both his art and his scientific work. The Adoration of the Magi, a commissioned painting he began in 1481, is a prime example. Though he worked diligently on this grand scene, with sketches and outlines that suggested great detail and depth, the work was abandoned, left incomplete, never fulfilling its intended role for the monks of San Donato. What should have been a stunning depiction of the Nativity, filled with the symbolism of angels, magi, and the divine, was never finished due to Leonardo's reluctance to commit to the final execution of his ideas. It was this unwavering commitment to perfection, the fear of delivering a flawed piece, that led him to abandon works that others would have considered masterpieces. Leonardo's frustration with his inability to complete projects was also tied to the patronage system of his time. The Medici family, Ludovico Sforza, and other Renaissance patrons often demanded rapid production of artwork and designs, but Leonardo's pace was slow, driven not by deadlines but by his need for continuous discovery. To him, each project was not a final product, but a step in a process of deeper exploration. His interest in learning, whether through anatomical dissections, the mechanics of flight, or mathematical formulas, often led him to abandon or delay works because he felt they were incomplete or inaccurate. His desire for perfected knowledge was more important than finishing the project at hand.
The political landscape of Renaissance Italy did not help. The unstable political environment, with constant shifts in power and allegiances, contributed to the delay and abandonment of numerous commissions. Leonardo was repeatedly caught in the turbulent current of Italian city-states, which made long-term projects or continuity in patronage nearly impossible. He would start a commission in one city, only to be drawn away by new political alliances or urgent royal demands, leaving many of his works unfinished. Leonardo's frustrations with his uncompleted works had a complicated effect on his reputation during his lifetime. For many contemporaries, Leonardo was a man of extraordinary talent, but his inability to deliver final works sometimes led to doubts about his reliability. The monks of San Donato, who had commissioned the Adoration of the Magi, were left with little to show for their investment, and the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza, was similarly left wondering whether his large-scale horse statue would ever come to fruition. To some, Leonardo was an artist forever lost in the clouds of his own ideals, unable to provide the tangible results demanded by those who paid him. Despite these frustrations, Leonardo's refusal to compromise on quality became an integral part of his long-term legacy. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who rushed to meet patron demands and produce works with fewer doubts, Leonardo's perfectionism meant that his works, whether finished or unfinished, carried a certain weight, a sense of intellectual and artistic depth. His uncompleted masterpieces, such as the Adoration of the Magi, the Battle of Anghiari, and the Sforza horse, have taken on a mythic quality, symbolizing the visionary genius that could never be fully realized. These works, left unfinished, only served to highlight the depth of Leonardo's ideas, making them all the more intriguing and timeless.
Over time, Leonardo's incomplete works would become symbols not of failure, but of visionary ambition. Artists and thinkers who came after him revered his intellectual curiosity and admired the fearless pursuit of perfect knowledge. Leonardo's legacy was no longer just about the works he completed,
but about the boundless potential of what he had conceived. His uncompleted projects became part of a larger narrative, one of genius unbound by time, a legacy that defied conventional completion in favor of exploration and innovation. In modern times, Leonardo's frustrations and uncompleted works are seen as one of the central features of his genius. His constant search for improvement, his refusal to accept mediocrity, and his desire for perfection made him the ultimate artist, engineer, scientist, whose influence stretched beyond his own era and continues to inspire today's technologists, artists, and scientists. The fact that his works were often left unfinished speaks to the unquenchable nature of his intellect, always seeking, always probing, always questioning, never satisfied with the limits of the present. Thus, Leonardo da Vinci's legacy, as a man of unfinished works, demonstrates that true genius is not defined by the works we complete, but by the vision we create, a vision that outlives us and continues to inspire others to dream beyond the possible.
In the twilight of his life, Leonardo da Vinci found solace not in the turbulent courts of Italy, but in the welcoming arms of King Francis I of France. At the age of 64, having spent years under the patronage of Ludovico Sforza in Milan and later wandering between Italian cities, Leonardo was in search of stability. A man whose genius had both brought him fame and alienated him from conventional artistic circles, Leonardo moved to France in 1516 at the invitation of Francis I, the youthful and forward-thinking king who is deeply fascinated by the works of the great Italian master. The decision to relocate to France came after years of political instability in Italy. Milan, where he had spent a significant portion of his career, was now under French control, and Leonardo was looking for an environment where his intellectual pursuits could be nurtured without the constant political turbulence he had faced in Italy. King Francis I, a monarch who valued art, science, and intellectualism, saw in Leonardo the perfect embodiment of the Renaissance ideal, a man who was both a scientist and artist, one who bridged the gap between the humanistic ideals of the Renaissance and the burgeoning scientific revolution. Leonardo's relationship with King Francis I was one of mutual respect and admiration. The king, captivated by Leonardo's vast body of work, invited him to live at the Château du Clos-Lucé near Amboise, providing the aging genius with comfortable accommodations and an environment that allowed him to continue his explorations in both art and science. Francis I offered Leonardo the title of first painter, engineer, and architect to the king, a title that signified not only the king's respect for Leonardo's talent, but also his desire to bring the artist into the heart of the French court. In the quiet of his final years, Leonardo found in Amboise the freedom to continue his work without the constant pressures of commission deadlines or political intrigue. While his health had begun to decline, the creative drive that had sustained him for decades remained, albeit tempered by the fragility of old age. Though no grand works were completed during his time in France, Leonardo continued to sketch, write, and experiment, his mind still alight with the same questions that had driven him in his youth.
His relationship with Francis I became more than that of a mere patron and artist. There are accounts suggesting that Francis I personally visited Leonardo during his final days, and it is said that the king held the artist's hand as he passed away, symbolizing a bond between the greatest living artist of his time and the monarch who understood and respected his genius. For Leonardo, these last years were both a refuge and a final opportunity to share his knowledge with a ruler who appreciated the interdisciplinary nature of his genius. It was, perhaps, the only place where he could feel at peace with his lifelong quest for perfection, knowing that his legacy would live on, not just in his completed works, but in the intellectual framework he had helped lay down for future generations. The year 1519 marked the end of an era. The death of Leonardo da Vinci at the age of 67 in Amboise, France. While the exact circumstances surrounding his death remain shrouded in mystery, the legacy of the Renaissance's greatest polymath is undeniable. As the world mourned the passing of a genius who had redefined the boundaries of both art and science, the questions surrounding his final days remain as elusive as his greatest works. How did the aging Leonardo, whose mind had so often soared far ahead of his time, confront the inevitable end? And how was he remembered by those who had witnessed the latter years of his remarkable career? Despite his physical decline, Leonardo's last years were marked by a sense of quiet reflection rather than resignation. Though he was no longer able to complete monumental works like the Sforza Horse or the Adoration of the Magi, his mind remained sharp, focused on his ever-expanding interests in anatomy, mechanics, and the laws of nature. During these final years, Leonardo's intellectual curiosity remained insatiable, and while his body may have failed him, his mind never stopped seeking. His work during this period was marked by theoretical musings rather than grand commissions. Accounts of Leonardo's deathbed reveal a man who, even in his last moments, remained deeply engaged with his intellectual pursuits. One of the most compelling aspects of his final days is the mystery surrounding his personal life, his relationships, his inner circle, and the legacy he would leave behind. While Leonardo had accumulated a vast body of work, many of his most profound contributions, particularly in the realms of anatomy and engineering, were incomplete or hidden from the world. What knowledge did he keep to himself? What were the secrets he carried with him to the grave?
At the time of his death, Leonardo's reputation was already that of a masterful artist, one whose paintings, such as the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper, had transformed the world of art forever. However, his scientific contributions, which were not fully appreciated during his lifetime, would later be recognized as groundbreaking in the centuries to come. Yet, in the years following his death, many of his writings and inventions remained hidden or were lost to history. His anatomical studies and mechanical designs, though ahead of their time, were not fully understood or appreciated until modern times, which only added to the mystique surrounding his life. Despite the fact that Leonardo's final years were marked by physical frailty, they were also filled with an enduring commitment to discovery and knowledge. He had spent his life dissatisfied with completion and constantly striving for perfection, and it was this very unquenchable thirst for understanding that made him the figure he is today, a timeless symbol of genius unbound by time. By the time of his death, Leonardo had accomplished more than most artists and scientists could dream in a lifetime, yet his legacy was far from complete. His unanswered questions, his unfinished projects, and his unspoken thoughts continue to captivate us today as we continue to seek the answers to the mysteries he left behind. Perhaps it is this very unfinishedness that makes Leonardo's legacy so profound, for in the incompleteness of his work lies the story of a man whose mind could never be fully captured, and whose ideas will forever remain ahead of their time. After Leonardo da Vinci's death in 1519, his vast intellectual output was at risk of being forgotten or lost to time. Unlike many of his Renaissance contemporaries, whose work was closely tied to established institutions and clear commercial appeal, Leonardo's legacy was scattered across a wide range of interests, from engineering designs and anatomical studies to painting and mathematics. The preservation of his manuscripts and inventions was not a straightforward task, and the genius of Leonardo was almost lost, locked away in his personal notebooks filled with cryptic notes and mirror writing.
In the years immediately following his death, Leonardo's manuscripts were dispersed. Many of his notes and sketches were left to his closest disciples, especially Francesco Melzi, who inherited most of the artist's written work. Melzi, a trusted apprentice, understood the significance of Leonardo's intellectual property, but there was little awareness of the full extent of its potential. These works, largely hidden from public view, remained in private collections until much later. During the 16th century, Leonardo's manuscripts made their way into the hands of several key figures, such as Gian Giacomo Trivulzio, who safeguarded the Codex Trivulzianus, one of Leonardo's anatomical studies. This period saw many of Leonardo's most groundbreaking ideas largely preserved in private libraries, inaccessible to the broader scholarly world. However, it was in the 19th century that the true rediscovery of Leonardo's genius began. The Codex Atlanticus, one of his most important and comprehensive collections of sketches and writings, was acquired by the Ambrosiana Library in Milan in 1882. This marked a pivotal moment in the preservation of Leonardo's work. As scholars gained access to his ideas, the significance of his inventions, such as the aerial screw, the precursor to the modern helicopter, and his designs for hydraulic systems, began to be understood. However, much of his scientific work was still a mystery, as many of his inventions were never realized and had to be reconstructed through the lens of modern technology. The preservation of Leonardo's ideas was not only a matter of physical safeguarding, it was the responsibility of those who recognized the value of his work to translate and apply it. Historians and scientists from the 19th and 20th centuries began to unlock the secrets of his anatomical drawings, revealing a level of detail and accuracy that would only be matched by modern scientists centuries later. Leonardo's notes on mechanics, aerodynamics, and hydrodynamics were so advanced for their time that many of his designs went unappreciated until technological advancements allowed them to be realized. Today, Leonardo's manuscripts are housed in major institutions such as the Vatican Library, the British Museum, and the National Library of France. The role of these institutions in preserving and rediscovering Leonardo's work has ensured that the genius of Leonardo continues to influence the arts, sciences, and engineering today, with his ideas permeating fields ranging from aerospace engineering to biomechanics. Leonardo da Vinci's ideas, once hidden in his manuscripts and designs, have had a profound and lasting influence on science, art, and engineering for centuries. His interdisciplinary approach, where art and science intertwined seamlessly, became a model for later thinkers, particularly during the scientific revolution.
Galileo Galilei, a pivotal figure in the scientific revolution, was one of the most significant thinkers influenced by Leonardo's work. While Galileo was primarily concerned with astronomy and physics, his ideas on motion and mechanics were informed by Leonardo's theories. Galileo's experiments in motion, particularly with falling bodies, echoed the principles of force and velocity that Leonardo had sketched out in his notebooks. Moreover, Leonardo's approach to scientific observation, his dedication to empirical study and experimental data, was directly passed on to Galileo, whose scientific method became a hallmark of modern scientific inquiry. The correlation between cause and effect in the natural world that Leonardo so carefully detailed in his anatomical drawings and mechanical studies directly shaped Galileo's work on the laws of motion. Moving into the realm of mathematics and physics, Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, was undoubtedly influenced by the geometric principles Leonardo had laid out. Leonardo's work on proportions, symmetry,
and the golden ratio laid the foundations for the later development of Newtonian physics. Newton's discoveries in gravity and optics owe much to the mathematical foundations that Leonardo explored in his own theoretical works. Leonardo's understanding of the mathematics of nature, especially the geometry of the human body and natural forms, provided the intellectual bedrock for Newton's laws of motion and the laws of optics. In the world of art, Leonardo's influence is perhaps most directly felt in the works of Michelangelo and Raphael, who studied his anatomy sketches and applied similar principles of naturalism in their own painting and sculpture. Leonardo's anatomical studies, particularly his dissection of the human body, allowed Renaissance artists to achieve unprecedented realism in their depictions of the human figure. His depiction of light, shading, and perspective in The Last Supper and Mona Lisa set a standard for later generations, influencing not only Renaissance painters but also artists in the Baroque and Romantic periods.
Leonardo's mechanical designs also inspired later engineers. His flying machine designs, though never realized in his lifetime, were rediscovered in the 19th century and became the foundation for later aviation pioneers. Wright brothers, George Cayley, and other aviation innovators cited Leonardo's flying machines as one of the many early concepts that inspired their own work. Similarly, Leonardo's hydraulic inventions, which detailed the use of water to power machinery, were studied and adapted during the Industrial Revolution. Through his innovations in engineering, anatomy, and aerodynamics, Leonardo da Vinci's legacy was far-reaching and instrumental in shaping the future of science, medicine, and art. His ideas, though sometimes ahead of their time, provided an invaluable source of inspiration for subsequent generations. In his interdisciplinary approach, Leonardo not only bridged the gap between art and science, but also laid the groundwork for the modern world as we know it. Leonardo da Vinci was, in many ways, a man ahead of his time, a genius whose ideas resonated far beyond the confines of his life. His legacy is not just about his completed works, like the Mona Lisa or The Last Supper, but also about the unrealized dreams that remain ingrained in modern thought. Leonardo was not just an artist, but a visionary whose influence on art and science continues to reverberate across the centuries. In the Renaissance, Leonardo's contributions were revolutionary, offering a new approach to humanism, the belief in human potential and the power of observation. Unlike his contemporaries, who often followed traditions and methods, Leonardo's art was an exploration of the world as it truly was. His anatomy studies and naturalistic depictions laid the foundation for realism in art. In The Last Supper, for example, Leonardo did not simply paint figures, but he captured the emotional depth of his characters. The expressions on the faces of the apostles conveyed not only their reactions to the impending betrayal, but also the universality of human experience. Leonardo was not content with painting mere idealized figures. He sought to represent the truth of human emotion and human nature. Beyond art, Leonardo's impact on science was monumental. While his scientific ideas were not fully realized during his lifetime, they shaped the future. His experiments in anatomy, including his dissections of human bodies, provided the most accurate representations of the human form in the Renaissance. His sketches of muscles, bones, and the nervous system were centuries ahead of their time. Leonardo's anatomical studies provided the foundation for future breakthroughs in medicine and biology, influencing the works of Vesalius and Harvey. He approached science the way he did art, through careful observation and a deep understanding of nature. His mechanical designs, from the flying machines to the aerial screw, were revolutionary in their understanding of physics and aerodynamics, laying the groundwork for modern engineering.
Leonardo's genius was not confined to just one realm. He embodied the Renaissance ideal that the pursuit of knowledge should be interdisciplinary. In Leonardo, art and science were one. His innovative approaches, whether in geometry, anatomy, or engineering, blurred the lines between these fields, establishing the groundwork for the intellectual revolutions that would follow. His work set a precedent for modern thought, paving the way for scientific method and the empirical pursuit of knowledge that would come to define the Enlightenment. As modern science and technology continue to evolve, the influence of Leonardo da Vinci remains unmistakable. His groundbreaking work on mechanics, anatomy, and flight continues to inspire engineers, scientists, and innovators today. Although Leonardo's inventions were far too advanced for his time, they laid the conceptual foundations for modern technologies that would only come to fruition centuries after his death. In the field of robotics, Leonardo's mechanical knight stands as one of the first recorded concepts of a humanoid automaton. This robot, designed to sit, wave its arms, and move its head, was a vision of artificial intelligence long before the field even existed. Today, engineers working on advanced robotic systems like Boston Dynamics robots or humanoid robots by Hanson Robotics can trace their conceptual origins back to Leonardo's drawings. His ability to blend the mechanical with the human has inspired the development of robots that move with the grace and complexity of the human body. Leonardo's impact on aerospace engineering is similarly profound. His flying machine designs, including the ornithopter and the aerial screw, were remarkably ahead of their time. While Leonardo's dream of human flight was never realized in his lifetime, his designs for aerial machines served as a conceptual foundation for the aviation industry. Pioneers like Sir George Cayley, who is considered the father of aerodynamics, were inspired by Leonardo's detailed observations of bird flight and wind dynamics. The Wright brothers, when they made their first flight in 1903, undoubtedly drew on the principles of flight first laid out by Leonardo. In anatomy, Leonardo's detailed dissections of the human body have had a lasting impact on modern medicine. His study of muscles, bones, and the circulatory system provided an unparalleled understanding of human anatomy. His sketches of the heart, brain, and muscular system were centuries ahead of their time and formed the basis for future discoveries in cardiology and neurology. Modern surgeons and anatomists still study Leonardo's drawings to understand the intricacies of the human body. His work in anatomical illustration helped bridge the gap between art and medicine, showing how the two fields could work together to represent the human body with precision and accuracy. Furthermore, Leonardo's designs for mechanical inventions, such as geared mechanisms and hydraulic systems, directly influenced the development of modern engineering. His studies in fluid dynamics and hydraulics anticipated the technologies that powered the Industrial Revolution and modern-day machinery. Engineers working today on hydraulic systems, gearing mechanisms, and automation systems can trace their conceptual roots back to Leonardo's drawings.
In modern aerospace, robotics, and medicine, Leonardo's legacy is not just a matter of historical interest. His visionary ideas continue to inspire. His work set a precedent for the integration of science and art and continues to serve as a touchstone for innovation. Leonardo da Vinci's mind, constantly blending the artistic with the scientific, the imaginative with the practical, paved the way for the modern technological age we live in today. As we draw the curtain on the extraordinary life of Leonardo da Vinci, one question lingers. What was the ultimate secret that he guarded so carefully through his art and science? Leonardo was not just a painter, nor just a scientist. He was a mystic, a visionary, and perhaps most intriguingly, a protector of knowledge. Throughout his life, his works were filled with hidden meanings and cryptic symbols, many of which were deliberately placed there for reasons that we are still trying to unravel centuries later. The ultimate secret that Leonardo hid may not be a singular discovery or invention, but rather a deeper philosophical truth that transcended the intellectual boundaries of his time. Many believe that Leonardo was driven by an insatiable desire to understand the interconnectedness of all things, nature, humanity, and the universe. His art, his anatomical studies,
and his mechanical inventions were all ways to explore and capture these interconnected truths. It is this quest, this understanding of universal knowledge that Leonardo kept hidden, perhaps not just from his contemporaries, but from all of history. One of the most profound mysteries surrounding Leonardo's work lies in the connections between his art, science, and the esoteric traditions of his time. Many historians and theorists have drawn parallels between Leonardo's symbolism and the hidden knowledge of the Templars, the secretive medieval order whose mystical beliefs and preserved knowledge were said to hold the keys to spiritual enlightenment and ancient wisdom. Was Leonardo, as some have speculated, privy to these secret teachings? Was his art not just a reflection of reality, but a deeper window into a hidden world, one known only to those who could decipher the coded messages within his works?
For instance, in Leonardo's Mona Lisa, many have noted the use of symmetry and the subliminal suggestion of spiritual symbolism, such as her enigmatic smile, which could represent the balance between the material and the divine. His fascination with proportions and the golden ratio, which was known to have mystical significance in ancient traditions, suggests that Leonardo's approach to art was not just an aesthetic pursuit, but a way of encoding deeper truths. The Vitruvian Man, with its emphasis on the harmony between the human form and cosmic proportions, may have been a visual key to a greater secret, one that Leonardo, through his cryptic notebooks and symbolism in paintings, guarded from the public eye. In addition, some of Leonardo's scientific inquiries, such as his studies on hydrodynamics and the design of flying machines, might have been part of an even larger effort to understand the natural forces and unseen realms that governed human existence. Was this knowledge related to the Templars' sacred doctrines, a mysterious wisdom they believed was passed down from the ancient world? Leonardo's blending of mystical knowledge with empirical observation could suggest that in some form he was trying to unravel not just the laws of nature, but the hidden metaphysical truths that the Templars and other secret societies may have long guarded. While the secrets of Leonardo's work may remain unraveled, his art and science continue to speak to those who seek deeper meaning. Perhaps more than a literal secret, Leonardo's true legacy lies in the way his works inspire us to look beyond the obvious and seek the invisible connections between all things. In his art and science, he left behind not just inventions and paintings, but a philosophical framework, a blueprint for those who are willing to look beneath the surface and discover the hidden truths that connect us all. As we stand in the shadow of Leonardo da Vinci's monumental legacy, it becomes clear that his life and works transcend time, pushing the very boundaries of what is possible in both art and science. Leonardo was not a man of his time, he was a man who lived between epochs, whose vision could not be fully realized in his own lifetime, but whose impact would echo for centuries to come. He is a bridge between the Renaissance and the modern world, and his influence continues to reverberate across fields as diverse as medicine, aerospace, and engineering.
Leonardo's ultimate legacy lies not just in the physical works he left behind, his paintings, his inventions, his anatomical sketches, but in the way his mindset reshaped how we view knowledge itself. He was a true interdisciplinary thinker, a pioneer of scientific inquiry and artistic expression, who believed that the laws of nature could be understood through art, and that art could be a means of exploring the world's deepest mysteries. Leonardo's legacy teaches us that creativity and science are not separate, but intertwined, and that innovation arises at the intersection of the two. What makes Leonardo's legacy so enduring is that it challenges us to think beyond the limits of our own time. His scientific knowledge, though groundbreaking for his era, was often ahead of its time, so much so that much of his engineering genius was not realized until the Industrial Revolution and beyond.
Leonardo's notebooks are filled with designs for machines, aeronautical devices, and hydraulic systems that were not feasible during the Renaissance, yet they prefigure modern technologies that have shaped the course of human progress. His vision of flight, for example, laid the conceptual foundation for the Wright brothers and modern aviation, even though his designs were never constructed in his lifetime. Leonardo's artistic masterpieces, too, transcend time. The Mona Lisa is more than just a painting. It is a symbol of human expression, the mysterious smile capturing the ambiguity of the human experience. The Last Supper, in its composition and emotional depth, remains a masterclass in narrative art, influencing generations of artists. But Leonardo's works continue to inspire, not only because of their beauty, but because of the depth of intellectual inquiry embedded within them. His paintings contain a knowledge of the human condition, as well as a scientific understanding of the natural world, a fusion that has kept art historians and scientists alike intrigued for centuries.
But beyond his completed works, Leonardo's true genius lies in the unfinished. The Mona Lisa and The Last Supper were not his final masterpieces. There were, of course, countless unrealized inventions and unfinished paintings. Yet it is in these unfinished works that we find the key to understanding Leonardo's true legacy. He did not seek to finish. He sought to understand. It was his relentless pursuit of knowledge and perfection, the courage to leave things incomplete, to leave us with more questions than answers, that continues to inspire innovators, thinkers, and artists today. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci didn't just change art or science, he redefined the very notion of genius. His legacy is not just in what he accomplished, but in how he approached the world. He showed us that the search for knowledge is endless, that creativity is not limited to one field, and that the mind's potential has no boundaries. Today, his work still speaks to us across time and space, urging us to think, to question, to create, and above all, to dream beyond the confines of what is possible. Leonardo's legacy is a legacy of unfathomable depth, and it is one that will continue to inspire humanity's quest for knowledge, forever shaping the boundaries of art and science for generations to come. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.